Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about The Celestial Toymaker, written by Brian Hazel, directed by Bill Sealer, and it is the first story in the producer Inna Lloyd's run. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about. As Brian Hales, this is his first script that got published. He had a story before that never got made called The Dark Planet, which Big Finish have covered, but I haven't got that one, so we're not going to talk about that one. And he would later go on to write many Doctor Who's and be the creator of one of Doctor Who's biggest monsters, the Ice Warriors. But we're not talking about that now. We're talking about the Celestial Toymaker. And this also introduces another big villain, even though we've only seen him once in the television series, and that's the Celestial Toymaker himself. It's also important to note as well that out of the 4 stories, only the last one exists in the BBC archives, as the other 3 are missing. And like always, I've decided to watch them, with the loose cannon reconstructions. And I got this DVD cover off the internet by Cyber Devil, I believe. Fantastic art. If you want to see the back and front of that, it looks very nice. And as well, this is another story like the arc before it, where it doesn't seem like a lot of people more like this one than the arc. But there are people who really didn't like this story, and it's fair enough. But it seems like another story where I have to kind of defend my opinion on this one, because it's, it's like Marmite, this story. You either love it or hate it. And although I do see that it has problems and it does have issues, I do really like this story. But maybe more for a guilty pleasure than a genuinely good story. But what is the story about? Well, the Doctor turns invisible. Hooray. And it turns out the TARDIS has landed on a strange world, the Toymaker's world, the Celestial Toy Room, as they call it. And basically, the Toymaker, he can basically manipulate anything to his will. He's basically a god. In fact, if we're going by out media, they actually later explain in like books and audios that he's one of the ancient ones, a celestial race that existed before, during the very early years of time itself. And not only that, but the Celestial Toymaker is also one of the Guardians. And the Guardians are like these representations of like good and evil and just like these different forms of morality. And the Toymaker, he's basically an immortal who's basically bored with his life, and he just wants to keep entertained by forcing people to play these games. And he is probably one of the best Doctor Who villains out there, in my opinion. It also helps that he's played by Michael Gough, one of the greatest British actors of the 60s and the 70s generation. But he's probably better known to you people as playing Alfred Pennyworth in the Tim Burton and the Joel Schumacher Batman films. So there you go. You probably didn't know that he was a big Doctor Who star. He was actually supposed to return to the series as the Toymaker in a Colin Baker story, but we will be tackling that one. So yeah, we will be going on to that one. You'll find out why when we get there, but we're talking about this story at the moment. So yeah, the Toymaker is a very great villain, and he controls this world basically. And what he does is he takes the Doctor to play this like logic game where he only has like a certain amount of moves, and he's got to basically solve this puzzle where it's like loads of little like triangles, and he can't put a big piece on top of a smaller piece, and he's got to move all the pieces of the pyramid onto another part of the board. And whilst this is happening, Stephen and Dodo have to play their own games, and it's like each episode has like their own task where they do their own task. Now, this is what probably a lot of people don't like about the story. It's very formula-driven. Like, we go to the first story has Stephen and Dodo tackling one task, and then it leads into the next task. Episode 2 is that task, leading into the next task, and then episode 3 is that task, leading on to the last task. And it's a very formulaic story. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but a lot of people don't like stories like that. So I kind of do understand why this story has a lot of hate. And yeah, it does kind of become a problem where by the last game, it's like they're not going to lose. They've clearly made their way through, but I don't know. It's the formula I think works, especially that we've got this celestial Toymaker control and everything, and Michael Gough just brings a brilliant performance to it. And this is also a strange story because, again, the Doctor has hardly anything to do in the story. In fact, in the second episode, the Toymaker basically makes him invisible apart from his hand so he can play the game, and removes his voice so he can't speak. And he doesn't get the voice back until part 4, halfway through part 4. So it's another one where William Hartnell was hardly in it. In fact, here's a fun fact. This story was supposed to be William Hartnell's last story, and it was supposed to end with the Toymaker giving the Doctor basically a new body, and the story was going to continue on through there. But they decided against it, as they could only have done that really once, and Inna Lloyd had the idea of coming up with a concept that they could constantly reboot the actor to play the Doctor. So this could have been William Hartnell's regeneration story. So that's really cool to note. But that didn't happen. But I like the scenes with the Doctor and the Toymaker, even if they do kind of repeat a lot, in that they have a very small conversation, and the Toymaker then kind of speeds up the game. And then later on he explains that if the Doctor completes the game before Stephen and Dodo complete all their games, then Stephen and Dodo will be trapped in the toy room forever. And yeah, so you can't really base this story on its plot, which I think a lot of people might struggle with, because, we do live in a world where plot is basically everything. However, there are other elements that you've got to consider when it comes to storytelling, like atmosphere, tone, characters, and all that. And where this story lacks in story, I think it makes up for the atmosphere and the connection between Dodo and Stephen, as first of all, Stephen is very dismissive of Dodo as she's like the new companion, and he's basically, with these games, he doesn't really want to play, and he just basically wants, he's very head first. He would be like, he's the type of person who, if they see the door, but they got to play the game, they'll be like, let's not bother this game, and then walk straight to the door, which is kind of like his downfall. But Dodo kind of helps him, calms him down as he starts to slowly start to play the games. And as well, Dodo just seems to really get along with the situations here, but maybe a bit too much, and it's up to Stephen then to kind of keep her on course, as she gets distracted really easy. As at one point in the third or second, they meet up with these two characters that are basically, the Toymaker put them there to distract them. And Dodo kind of gets up in their drama, and she asks one of the people to help. But obviously that gets him nowhere, as he gets into a fight with the other character, and anarchy ensues. And yeah, so Stephen kind of has to put her to get focus, and Dodo's got to put Stephen onto a more, right, how about instead of trying to headbutt our way through, we try and work this logically. And yeah, when you think of the story like that, it does really hold up really well. And also the atmosphere, this really strange world. Maybe it doesn't come so well when you got like an audio form or something, but when you got the pictures and you see this strange world, it's clearly probably one of the more cheaper looking episodes, as it's literally just a set with only a few props, and the props are basically toys and stuff. So maybe I could be wrong, but I'm going to guess, make a theory that this is probably one of the cheaper Doctor Who stories, but it really works as the Toymaker's room. The toy room is supposed to be this this universe controlled by thought, and it's not really real. It's supposed to be like a make-believe world, and for that it really works. However, there are some side characters in this that people also get really annoyed with, and yeah, I can't really defend them. With Dodo and Steven's storylines, the Toymaker kind of brings in characters to dolls that he's given life to Steven and Dodo to make their challenges a bit more harder. And the first one, he gives them two clowns, and they are so annoying. Personally, I think they are annoying, but it does work to the story's atmosphere, as they've got like these high-pitched voices and they cheat, and one of them kind of like doesn't speak and does like uses a horn to talk, and it really gets on Steven's nerves. And I think that was the kind of like the point, the feel of it is supposed to be like in a world that doesn't make sense. It's basically Doctor Who meets Alice in Wonderland. That's a very great description. As well, in the second episode, the second bunch of characters are a pack of cards that the Toymakers bring to life. So we got the King, the Queen, the Fool, and I can't remember what the other one was. And basically, it's one of those cases where Stephen basically wants to be like, right, we want to just headbutt first and get into a thing, but Dodo kind of gets them to help, and basically it's less now about like them competing against each other, which the Toymaker kind of wanted that to, and more of them all working together, even if these are basically puppets. And they are kind of dull characters, and especially how when Dodo and Steven like leave the room, the camera still sticks to them for some reason, and they're very like simplistic characters that you've seen like 100 times. So they're one characters, and they get kind of frustrating as their voices and the over top nature of them. But again, it fits with the atmosphere. And then the second bunch of characters in the third episode are this woman chef, and this soldier, and they bicker a lot. And there's a bit where Dodo got the soldier to help, but he kind of gets into an argument with the chef, and anarchy ensues as they start throwing cutlery everywhere. And Stephen is like, he's not having any of it, and he just completely ignores them as he tries to find the key. So yeah, it works favourably to Stephen, Dodo and the atmosphere, but maybe in terms of plot and their own characters, it really fails. And then you got the last character, which is one of those you either can't stand him and it ruins the story for you, or you just love him because he's just such a bastard. And that is, I can't remember his name. The schoolboy, I'm going to call him. And this is this full-grown man dressed up like a schoolboy, as the Toymaker suggests that all these other characters, though basically work for them. They're too nice, they're too kind, and maybe in a way that they want, like that he can give them life, but he can't fully control them. They do have like their own mind. So he decides that for the last game, he's going to put an actual somebody who really wants to win, like a proper evil character, and he gives the schoolboy. And yeah, like I said, you either love him or hate him, and I personally like him. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. That probably disappoints a lot of you, but man, the guy who plays him so over the top. By the way, this is in part 4, so we actually got videos to record him. And the guy in his face, he's just so enthusiastic about his role that it always puts a smile to my face. And when they do play the game, it does kind of seem like he's making the rules up as he goes along, and he's constantly like not telling Stephen and Dodo stuff until it's too late. And then there's a great bit, and he basically winds up Stephen and Dodo, but like you can see it's a bit more on purpose. With the other characters, it's more like they're getting on their nerves. And there's a great bit where Stephen has to basically jump back, and he gets a slingshot and whacks Stephen across the back of the head. And that bit made me laugh my ass off. There's also a bit as well where he pretends he's cut his foot, and so he makes Dodo come up to him, which basically cheats the game, and so Dodo has to go back to the first point. As their game is basically snakes and ladders, where they roll the dice and they got to move up to get closer to the TARDIS. And he wins. He actually wins the game, but earlier on he puts slippery powder on one of the platforms, and he slides on it and he dies. So he basically falls for his own trap. And yeah, and so Stephen and Dodo then play the game and they win. And we go into our final segment. Now, before I get into that, I just remembered something. The story has a bit of a controversial moment where somebody says the rhyme of eeny, meeny, miny, mo, which we all know, but this, because it's the 60s, they used the original version. Now, for those of you who don't know, in the original version of eeny, meeny, miny, mo, it says the N-word. And yeah, this Doctor Who story says the N-word, but it is so quickly said and so like casually that unless somebody pointed out to you, you wouldn't have noticed. I didn't notice when I first watched it. It was only until I looked it up on the internet that I discovered that this story was the first time Doctor Who had the N-word in it. So back in the 60s, it was deemed appropriate to say it on television, but now we know better. So just a heads up, if you decide to watch this story does say the N-word at one point, even if it's so quick and brief you don't notice it. But anyway, back to the story. The Doctor basically has got one more move to complete the game, and so he decides not to do it and goes into the TARDIS. However, he can't go unless he completes the game, and we're basically at a stalemate, as if the Doctor completes the game, the toy room is destroyed and the Toymaker has to make a new toy room. But if they destroy the toy room, it destroys the TARDIS and the Doctor and Stephen and Dodo as well. And so the way out of it, spoilers by the way, is kind of cheap. That the Doctor says, because earlier on in the story, the Toymaker could make the game speed up by shouting out like what move he wants it to, and then it can speed up when Doctor tries and slows down on purpose. And what the Doctor does is he uses the TARDIS to imitate the Toymaker's voice and basically makes the game finish whilst he's still in the TARDIS, so he can travel in the TARDIS whilst the world is destroyed. And that's how the story ends. It's very cheap, it's anticlimactic, and it does kind of let the story down, even for me who did like the story. However, it makes up for it for a small segment where Dodo is grateful, and it's like we never see the Toymaker again, and the Doctor's like, don't speak too soon. Although we destroyed the toy room, the Toymaker is an immortal and he cannot physically die. It's him dying is an improbability, and there's a high chance that they could see the Toymaker again, which we will get into, even though it took bloody over 30 years in real time to even come up with the possibility of a sequel to this story. But yeah, that's the Toymaker. What did I think about it? I can see why people don't like it, and it's one of those stories where you either like it or hate it. But I personally recommend you try it out and see what you think. I personally enjoyed it. Though the story is repetitive and the story isn't thick in themes or like any values. There's a lot of atmosphere, and Dodo and Steven do get a little bit more character work into their bits, even if it's a bit repetitive. So just keep that in mind when you watch the story. So yeah, the Celestial Toymaker. Check it out. So join me next time where we go to the old Wild West in the Gunslinger or the Gunfighter. I can't remember. It's one of those two. I'll see you next time, and we'll find out the title on the Doctor Who Marathon.